Hi everybody, this is Mike Oppenheim and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week I am coming to you live from my home in Phoenix, Arizona with no guest. Yes, that's right, it's episode number 200, and I decided that I could try for once to just talk by myself to myself and then release it as a podcast. Some of my favorite podcasters do this regularly, and I've always admired what they do. I've actually never wanted to do it, but anytime I don't want to do something, I see that as a challenge I should probably take and not just skirt to the side. So I am here talking about my own show, Coffin Talk, which feels a little self-loving and then some, but the show has been more successful than I ever thought it would be, and we do have like a real audience that participates. So I fielded some questions from some of you, and I didn't actually read any of them ahead of time on purpose because I thought it'd be more fun to be surprised. And then I also just made notes to talk about why I started the podcast, why I'm going to continue it past episode 200. I thought I would go through some of the most memorable episodes to me, and then I also thought as extra fun I would go over the most popular episodes. So actually I'm going to start with why I started the podcast because it's the question I get asked the most often. I don't really have like the best answer for that, but I would say it's one of three things and probably all three. One, we started it, my wife and I, when COVID was going on, and my wife and I had just been married. We had no kids together, and we were living alone in a house, so we had tons of time, and we thought it would be fun to interview people. And then the idea for what to interview people about came before that, which is that I did hospice for a while, and in hospice, as I've said many times, I discovered that Americans in particular have a different attitude and approach to talking about and or ignoring death than most other cultures I've learned about or visited or lived in, and I thought it would be actually responsible to start talking about death regularly as someone who saw people not be prepared for it and then suffer tremendously because they weren't prepared. And then the third reason I did it is because I have been told repeatedly over and over again throughout my life that I'm a good conversationalist, which is different than being a good talker. I think I'm a good listener, and I think I ask good questions. So I thought it would be fun just to interview people, and it has been. It has been a total pleasure. I've met so many people through this podcast that I would not have met. I've gotten to know them better. I've gotten to know former students of mine, friends of mine, clients of mine, people who I admire. I've booked some pretty big guests. My brother, Sam, is our booking manager, and he's booked even better and bigger guests than I have. And my wife, Alana, she listens to a lot of the episodes. Sam listens to all of them, and they both help me produce it, and we make images, and we send emails out, and it's just really fun. It's a family affair. So that's why we started it. Why we're continuing it is definitely a lot of what I just said, but also I just have this thing inside me that says if you're doing something and it provides you and others with pleasure and it's not too stressful, you should keep doing it. So even though I am very busy, I have many jobs and I have a full family, and I would like to spend more time sitting on a couch and watching Netflix, I am not doing that, and I am choosing instead to still dutifully interview one guest every single week and then release an episode every single week. So that means there's about 52 episodes a year. Like I said, this is episode number 200, and I think we started the show on January. I don't know, we banked 5 episodes to start the show because I was petrified that we wouldn't be able to get them out in time. So I recorded, and I think we released the first 2 episodes on January 31st. The very first guest was my brother, Sam, who I guess, for lack of a better explanation, is also my best friend. I call a lot of people my best friend. You'll probably notice that if you listen to this podcast, because guest number 2 was also my best friend, Kay Vanderbark, who she's a really old friend. We met in college. We've been best friends ever since. And I hope she listens to this just because it would be funny to hear her talk. No, it would be fun. It is funny for me to imagine her hearing me talk about her in the third person. And actually, that goes for pretty much everyone I'm about to say. After that, episode 3 was another extremely close friend, my friend Jeremy Suraf from Buffalo, New York. Love him to death, and it was great to have him on. So those are the first 3, and I think we recorded all of those right away. And then the best man in my last wedding, because I've been married twice, is my friend Grant Louts, and he was guest number 5. So that was special. I'm not going to go through every single one, but I do have a list of all of them, and then I will later touch back on the most memorable ones because I think that might be interesting to people. But before I do that, I think I should field some of the questions that I got. And then I will also tell you the top 5 most downloaded episodes of all time. I think all of them will surprise you. They surprised me. I know that. Okay, so now I'm going to open the questions, and I seriously have not looked at any of these. So here we go. My dear Aunt Celeste, who was also a guest on the show, she just turned 80. I like to give you perspective, as you know, of where people are in their life. And she said, "Where exactly do you think you'll end up when you die? And do you think I'll get to hug you wherever you are?" And then she added, "I certainly hope so, because I'll take as many as I can in this life, just in case there's no happy hereafter. Love you bunches." That's a really sweet message, and thank you, Aunt Celeste. I don't think I end up anywhere when I die, because I am no longer convinced that the universe has linearity to it or time. I think time is a function and a feature that humans in our dimensional existence perceive. But as Albert Einstein said, and as I've experienced in a few moments of my life, especially a car accident I was in, the perception of time can slow. And if you study not quantum physics necessarily, but like if you study the theory of light and the speed of light, it is possible to travel any distance in almost no time. And you will not age at the same rate as the place you left will if you bother to return. All of that leads me to believe that I will not end up somewhere when I die. I don't have a linear existence, so I'm not going to be able to look back or forward. I think what happens when I die is that connection to time that I cannot undo without the help of drugs or sleep will become normal again, and this will seem abnormal. That's my current working theory. And thank you, Aunt Celeste. I love you. The next question is, I would like to know, if you had the opportunity to have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would those 3 people be? You could have dinner with each one-on-one. Wow, that's a great question. I would have answered this so differently when I was young. When in my 20s, it would have been all people I worshipped and idolized. And now that I'm older, this is a hard question. If either of my parents were deceased, which they're, thank God, not, it would definitely be both or one of them. That would be a no-brainer. I think I'm going to go with my grandfather on my mother's side. I called him Papa. I would have dinner with him because we were so close, and he passed away when I was 27, and I think I was just getting to the age where I could have really talked to him about things differently, and he never got to meet any of my children. And so it would be nice to like meet him and kind of like show pictures and talk about what it's like to be a dad, and talk about what it's like for his daughter, my mom, to be a grandma and things like that. I just think that would have been really fun. I think, yeah, he died before my brother even got married, so he never got to see any of his great grandkids. And while I love his wife, my granny, and my dad's mother, I wouldn't choose them because they didn't live long enough for me to have such a close relationship that I would want to meet them. So I think the second person I would pick is actually my dad's dad, who I never met. He died before I was born. I believe he died in 1970. I want to say 76, but I don't know. I know he was not alive to meet my brother, who was born in 1979. So he died before I was born, and I never got to meet him. And I just am dying to know in person by meeting him what characteristics, if any, I have from him. I'm assuming I have some. So I would just like to meet him and get to know him and know that part of my gene pool, and also just know the man who raised my dad, because I don't know that, and it would be interesting. So that's 2 of them, both of my grandfathers. And the third person, this is really hard. This is the hardest question. My brain keeps going, okay, this is weird. I want to have dinner with the person who knows exactly what happened to JFK. I'm just curious. That's why. I was trying to think. I know I want to meet someone who had a level of power and knowledge that I would never have or ever have access to, and I don't really care what epoch it's from, but since I'm from this one, and the JFK mystery seems to be something that is or is not solvable at this point, because I believe every single person who could have been alive at that point is almost dead, if not dead. So, or alive and, old enough to be participants. So yeah, that's my answer. It would be my 2 grandfathers and the person who knows who killed John F. Kennedy Jr. I'm guessing it's one of the Dulles brothers, because I just feel like they were in the CIA and would have known. Okay, so that's it. Those are my 3. I almost went with Steve Martin, just in case anyone's curious why I was hesitant so much, because I love Steve Martin and I would just like to meet him. But I just don't think he'd be that interesting in person. I think he's more of a performer than a person I would want to talk to. Okay. Another listener asks, at what age did you first wonder about what happens when we die, or after we die? Earlier than I could ever remember. It's always been on my mind. I just remember being really young and thinking, if God invented us, then who invented God? And if no one invented God, then how does God know who invented himself or herself? I think at the time I would have thought of God as a person. Now I don't. And, there's just that whole, they call it like the Russian nesting doll paradigm. But basically, that just started bothering me when I was really young. There was something off. I was like, wait a second. If God tells people that he or she came from here and created this and that, isn't there someone who had to create that? And I just, like, that started this weird life of mine where I've always just kind of wanted to keep living, because I think it's so fun to be in this movie. And I say that as, like, elections come and go and wars come and go and so many quote unquote awful things come and go. I still just think it's amazing to be alive, and I'm dying to live this life fully and then know what happens when you die. I just think it's going to be really fun or funny. That's my theory. I just think it's going to be hilarious. Like, you're going to somehow get the joke that we all kind of feel there is one. Maybe we don't all. That's pretty braggadocious. I think a lot of us feel like there's a cosmic joke. It's even a phrase. So, okay, some more questions. In what way has hosting an interview podcast changed the way you act or think? It's made me much more open-minded, specifically to religion. I've always had a weird chip on my shoulder for and against religion. It would be very hard for me to explain this quickly, but I'll try. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life are organized religious adherents, and some of the worst people I've ever read about or studied were also in the same religion. And so much of history is a convoluted mix of good people doing good things because of a religion and very bad people getting away with very bad things because of a religion. And so this podcast has helped me see that you can't blame the institution ever. You should only worry about yourself and being good. And so if other people are doing the same thing, they can be in any religion they want. And groupthink, it might be scary, but it's not my job to judge groupthink or ban it or uphold it. So that is the thing that has changed the most, because it would be very messed up. It would be very, like, weird of me to interview people and lie to them and say I respect their religion or not. So I really had to come to terms with that before I could start interviewing everyone from every religion, which is my goal. So, good question. What burning question do you wish you could have asked a guest but neglected to ask? This is hilarious. This is really truthful. I just wish I could have asked every guest in private what they really think about Donald Trump, whoever's running against Donald Trump in all 3 elections he's ran in, and what they think really matters. I just think most people lie about that subject. I think they lie in every direction too. It's not just in one direction. And so I kind of always don't ask that because it's too personal. And I think the fact that that person, Donald Trump, is so polarizing is so interesting to me. And so that's a burning question I never get to ask people. And I don't care what you think about him. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I am puzzled and flummoxed and bamboozled by how much energy people give to the subject of him, especially people who hate him. And no, I'm not a fan of him. I don't mind saying that on this podcast. I think he's not the best guy, and I don't think he is a great leader. And I think that electing people who make fun of other people to their face is not a great idea. With that said, to be fair, I am not a member of either party, and I'm not really a political person in that way. I'm more of like a humanitarian. So while I do have political opinions, they kind of fall to the wayside when any bigger picture issue comes up. I am just the most anti-war person you will ever meet. So there you go. I probably just lost like 30 subscribers. That's okay. It's the podcast game.
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
All right, next question. If you had to rename the generations and change the dates associated with them, by what criteria would you separate generations and how would you name them? That's a really interesting question, and I'm sure this is related to the fact that I ask every guest what generation they're from. I think I would put baby boomers only up to 1960 instead of 65-ish, and I think I would make Gen X 1960 all the way till 1975, and then I would have a micro generation from 75 to 85 called like the Atari generation or something, and that would just be people who had some electronics but not a lot, and who used checkbooks but also saw ATMs become popular. And then I would say 85 to like 95, 2000 makes sense as a generation. And then I couldn't possibly start to get into 2000 and beyond because there's little kids and I can't read their generational energy and all that. But also I would like to say generations are a zeitgeist within the American culture. They're not really an international phenomenon. So all of the answers I just gave are really to my personal country and culture, which is America. How do you think it is best to memorialize the dead? I don't think there's one way to do that, and I think you should do whatever makes you feel good, not them. I don't think dead people have feelings. What funeral practices or burial methods or memorials do you think work best for society and family? Why? I think some people want to have a memorial in the home, and other people want a memorial they visit. So I think tombstones work really well for some people, and then I think ashes work well for others. So I think if you have children, maybe you should just ask them what they want and then do a hybrid. Personally, I would love, and I hope my wife remembers this if she outlives me, which women are supposed to outlive their husbands. I do not want to be, I don't mind if there's a tombstone or some memorial of me, but I really want to be just put back in the ground so I can fertilize a plant. I just think that is fun and I like nature. Great questions. Great questions. I'm having fun answering these. Okay, next question. You often talk about reviewing your life before you die. What are you the most proud of? What are you the most ashamed of? Wow, great question. I have to tell you that was asked by my wife, just because it's so personal, but also awesome. I do talk about reviewing my life. I don't think I talk about it before I die, though, which is the only caveat I would make. I think that as you die, when you die, there's a life review. I've heard it from enough near-death experiences, and it just makes sense to me. However, I don't think it's a Clockwork Orange scenario where, like, you have to watch bad things. I think you see things without your personal ego involved, and it's just fair. And so I think that's also our problem in life is we have this filter that we keep using on everything. So like, let's go back 5 minutes in the podcast when I was talking about politics and like war and stuff. I have a filter that tells me war is awful. I don't think war is actually objectively or subjectively awful or good. I think that it's actually just war and I'm the one who has like this ego involved and all this other stuff. So that's my first kind of thing. And so the question was, what am I most proud of and what am I most ashamed of? I'm definitely the most ashamed of the way I handled my I'm trying to think how to phrase this. This is hard because my son might listen to this someday. I have a son from a previous marriage, and his mother and I did not get along well for the last year we were married. We divorced when he was 1.5 exactly. And for his second birthday, I gave her a gift to go to Thailand to have him visit his grandparents. And while they were gone, I took a vacation and then came home, and I was ready to come pick him up at the airport. And I got an email that said, my back's hurt, I can't fly. That sounded weird. And then when I started calling and they didn't return my calls, it felt even weirder. So then I realized that they were just not planning on coming home. And then I got an email from my son's maternal grandfather, my former father-in-law, just basically announcing we've decided to keep not only our daughter, but your son in Thailand, and we're going to raise him, have a nice life. I called the U.S. State Department, and unfortunately, the lawyer they recommended, or the one that I don't think they recommended him. Anyway, he told me to go hard at them, and he was right if they were American, but instead they're from a different culture. And by going hard, meaning telling them this is not okay, I absolutely demand that we keep our custody agreement. I have 50% right to see my son. If you want to renegotiate the contract so he lives in 2 countries, that's fine, but this is not acceptable. And they took extreme offense to that, and they pretty much have tried their hardest and almost succeeded to cut me out of my own son's life. It is something I used to be angry about. It is something I used to be bitter about. It is now something I'm just trying to reckon with. So what I'm most ashamed of is just that I had a feeling not to do that, not to send that letter, and I went against that feeling, and that's the number one and only thing I'm ashamed of in my entire life. What I'm most proud of is exactly everything I've done since then, which is to miss my son so much every day that it hurts, and yet not make that other people's problems, and also not make it my son's problem, and also not get weird and obsessive and like sulky, and also to move on and get married and have 2 other children, but never forget my son and still silently hope and pray to the universe that things work out and he comes back into my life, because I love him. I helped raise him until he was 2. I saw him every single day of his life until he was about 5, thanks to Skype and other technology. And I miss him terribly, and I love him, and I know who he is, and he knows who I am. And I would just give anything to have him back in my life. So I'm so proud that I've kept that attitude and that I didn't try to like forget him or move on. I have not moved on. If you're listening to this, my son, Tyler, I have not moved on. I love you. All right. Oh, and my other 2 daughters, if you're listening, because you're older, I love you too. I love all 3 of you equally. It's amazing. Have kids, you'll understand. All right. Do I have a bucket list? If so, what's on it? Not really. I did. It was have kids, and I would love to live to be over 100. That's just a weird goal I've had my whole life. And I would like to visit some countries I haven't been to. Let's see. Do I really have a bucket list? No, I really just don't. I'm just not that kind of person. I've always done whatever I feel like doing in my life. I got a master's degree. That was fun. I taught. I've done like everything I've ever wanted to do. I really have. And I'll keep doing it. So no, I don't really have a bucket list. Or if I did, I'm done with it. But living to 100 is a sturdy, steady goal that I have and have always had, and I'm still working towards. And I make a lot of health decisions based on that. Does being creative make you feel alive? Yes, definitely. Every time I want to quit doing creative things, I start to feel like the feeling that you get before you're bored, and I realize that that's why you don't stop creating. So it doesn't matter if you're doodling, it doesn't matter if you download an app and you just like color pictures, it doesn't matter. If you're creating and you're being creative, it's up to you. Taking a walk can be creative. Just be creative. It does make you feel alive. I totally think it does. Other things that make me feel alive, because it was a follow-up question within that question, having children makes me feel alive. Sometimes, this is so weird, sometimes the right advertisement on TV, because they're really trying to get into my heart, will work, and that makes me feel alive. I know that's a really strange example, but I've noticed as I get older that really well done sentimental moments really work on me, and that the point of them for me is they make me feel alive. Sentimentality is a feeling that makes me feel alive, and it's not nostalgia. It's different. Maybe I should write about that sometime. I don't know. What do you think is the purpose of life? Not the meaning, the purpose. It's not whatever you make it. I think that's a really weird answer that people give, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I just don't agree with that. That's not how it feels to me. I think the purpose of life is to learn how to be less and less and less selfish. It doesn't mean to give and give and give more. That's not the same thing. It's just to like learn how to take yourself out of the equation. One of my heroes, his name is Ram Dass. He said, the first half of your life should be spent trying to become somebody, and the second half of your life should be spent trying to become nobody. And I think I'm in the second half of my life, and I love saying that. Just to be clear, I want to live to be 100, and I'm 43, so I don't think I'm in the second half of my life by years, but I do think maturity-wise, hitting 40 was like a big number. I think you have like birth to 40, and then you have like 40 to about 80 if your health is good. And I'm basing this on watching not just my parents, but like every relative I've ever had. And then I think after 80 is what I like to call bonus time. And if you don't like bonus time, you'll leave earlier. And if you like bonus time, you'll stay longer. But most people in my generational heritage get really like bored and kind of like not as into life as their late 90s come. And I have a feeling that's just because your physical body is just not working out for you even in your 50s and 60s. So just go figure what it's like at that age. So I think the purpose of life is to learn to be less selfish, to learn how to like quiet your mind when it's yelling at you in any direction. So if it's saying speed up, slow down, don't do that, take that, you need that, that's not theirs, like all those thoughts, I think it's learning to not ignore those thoughts, just to realize those thoughts are inappropriate. I don't need to act on them. Just like I should have 10 more drinks at the bar is an inappropriate thought. Like we can learn how to stop listening to thoughts that aren't going to put us in a good direction. Wow. Well, that's it. Those are all the questions that I wanted to answer. I did get to all of them. I'm shocked. I did not think I would. And I'm glad I didn't read them ahead of time. That was really interesting. So now I think, like I teased, I will tell you the most downloaded episodes. And then I will go into a few of the most memorable. And then I'm going to peace out. So why don't we do a top... let's just do a top 6. And the reason I'm going to start with 6 is because number 6, drumroll, Tiffany, is my wife Alana, episode number 100. So this is episode number 200, and I have a feeling it'll get more downloads than normal, but the 6th to most downloaded episode in the history of Coffin Talk podcast is episode number 100, featuring my wife. It's me interviewing her. It's a good listen. I actually suggest you listen to it if you're into the show. Number 5, I would never have expected, but I actually still follow this guy on Twitter, and I think he's hilarious. And his name is Jesse Jackson. Yes, just like the famous politician / civil rights leader, except he's a white dude from Texas, and he's a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. And so he had me on his podcast, and I just loved him, and I think he's a great, gregarious, interesting, very intelligent man. And so he came on my podcast, and I guess he has a huge following, because anytime you're on my top list, it's usually because you had people listen to my episode, not my own fans. So I have a fan base, but I can kind of tell when it goes outside of that. And speaking of which, this would apply to the next one as well, actually all of the top 5. And so the next one would be, by the way, that was episode 129. Episode number 81, a Taoist monk Young Rao. This one was the hardest get I've ever had. He was on a podcast with a very famous person I love, a comedian, Duncan Trussell. And I just took a stab in the dark, and I wrote him an email, and I told him how much I loved him on the podcast, because I did. He agreed to come on, and it was really interesting. We recorded it for over an hour, and then he had like notes for me to edit, and I did all of it because he was a big get, and he's a big guy, and he's a pretty famous author. And I ended up buying his book and reading it, his memoir / autobiography. We even make fun of that term on the podcast episode. So that was episode number 81. Episode number 103 was the 3rd to most downloaded ever, and that was, air quotes, the other twin, Becky Arthur. And so I had a really close friend from Portland, Oregon, Kate Arthur, on, and she and her 5 sisters had recently lost their father to, he had taken his own life, and she came on and talked about it, and it was really helpful for a lot of people. I got a lot of feedback for that one. And then she ended up having her twin sister came on, and her twin sister I had a class with in college, but I didn't know it because we weren't friends. But then when I met the other twin, meaning Kate, and then her sister, the twin who I'm talking about now, the one who's on episode 103, Becky, she came to visit, and we recognized each other. So it was very strange. It was just this weird moment in life where I'm like, oh, identical twins look the same, but you don't actually like see them the same, because if you know one, they just look different. Their personality comes alive. So that was really fascinating to me. So that's episode 103, the other twin, Becky Arthur, and it was a great episode. Number 2, the second most downloaded of all time, very recent episode, number 191, Jenks Farmer. He's just an amazing guy. Like, I read every blog of his religiously, and I love him, and interviewing him, I was so nervous just because I like him so much. And he's a farmer and a gardener and a cult. I'm going to use all the wrong terms. He's going to kill me if he hears this. He's busy. I doubt he'll listen. But anyway, he's just a great, great guy, and it was so fun to interview him. He's a civil rights activist. He's just amazing. So his episode got a ton of downloads, and it's probably still going to get even more because that's how things work. And actually, yeah, he's one behind number 1. So that's crazy. Wow. And number one, and it's been this way the whole time, is episode number 77. And she, someone else referred her to me from Twitter, and she had a pretty big following, and I was so thankful. She's this lovely young woman from Michigan, and she's a funeral director. And her name was Samantha Bone. And her episode was so interesting to me. She just talked about what it's like to run a funeral home. It's crazy. And she talked about like Michigan law and all this stuff, and it was so interesting. So those are the 6 most downloaded episodes. My wife is number 6, and then the top 5 are a devout Springsteen fan, a Taoist monk, a twin, a farmer, and a funeral director. And so there you have it. Those are the top 5 most downloaded, top 6 episodes of Coffin Talk. And lastly, just because I thought it would be fun, I will go over a couple of my favorite ones ever. And I'm sorry if this offends people, because I know that there's a ton of you. But the most memorable episode to me is, most memorable ones are my father, for sure. Episode number 54, this guy Christian Sundberg, who claims to have prenatal memories, meaning he remembers what it's like to be a multidimensional being before you become a human, even in the uterus. And that stuck out and still blows my mind. And I read his book, and I've listened to him, and he just sounds like he's not lying, and it's just so interesting. Another one of my favorite episodes was number 49 with Kirk Nurmi. He was a death penalty. He was a what's it called? He's a defendant for people on death row. And he would do like pro bono cases and stuff. He's just an amazing guy. I realize I'm grossly unprepared to go through 200 episodes and tell you all my favorites. So I'm just gonna say that definitely Christian Sundberg, episode number 54. That's the one I would tell everyone. And then I love the one with my dad, which I can't remember what number it was. I think it was 25, my dad. And then, gosh, now I feel bad. Here, let me just check. 25. No, 25 is Craig Berg, and he's a transcendental meditation teacher, and he's one of my favorites. So it was him, Craig Berg, Kirk Nurmi, the lawyer, Christian Sundberg, and my dad. Those are like the 4 most memorable for me. Also, this woman who was on the show Alone, she's a survivalist. That was a really memorable one. But gosh, just looking back, I mean, we've just had so many guests. So many guests. It's crazy. We've had someone who was in a school shooting. People she knew literally died. Her kids were in daycare. Episode number 75, my friend Caroline Randall. We've had a death historian, funeral directors, Mormons, monks, hippie landscapers, folk musicians, people who are committed to smoking cigarettes and wanted to talk about it, science teachers who are atheists, chemical engineers, recovering alcoholics, former New York City Police Department detectives. We've had domestic violence counselors, holistic psychotherapists, ghost helpers and psychics. We've had a woman from Uganda. We've had Akashic Records angels, NDA survivors, machine learning experts, ghost club memberships, Alaska fishing boat people, someone who survived the Iran coup and they live to tell it, and they're in America. We have a woman who was in a cult. She grew up in a cult. We have another guy who grew up in a what he called a cult, which is Jehovah's Witness, and another person who's an ex-Mormon. We've had end-of-life activists. We've had people who do euthanasia. We've had a clown. We've had psychics, multiple ones. We've had philosophers. We've had people who help deal with death insurance. We've had politicians. We've had comedians. We've had rock jocks. We had a CNN analyst. We've had a virtual reality expert. We've had celestial shamans. We've had anthropologists. We've had so many people. It's been amazing. I have loved doing the show. It's a total pleasure. We had a social psychic on the show. I'm sorry, I'm just still looking at all this crazy stuff. It has just been, I mean, looking back, I'm just shocked. We've had Jainists. We've had philologists, lawyers. We've had adolescent experts. We've had online dating experts. The near-death people blow my mind. It's just been so fun. A professional nomad. We've had ex-Marines. We had a person who walked the Camino. Past lives experts. Gem dealers. We had a moped outlaw. We had an herbalist. It's amazing. I love the show. I love anyone who's still listening. I love you even if you didn't listen. I'm just a weird, corny guy who's full of love. And I will give a plug. If you want to support me and you want to support the show, please consider a premium subscription. It does help. It really does. The day I quit is going to be the day where my kids need too much time and attention, and the income side of this isn't enough. And I'm not saying that as a threat or a warning. I'm just letting you know that that's literally the only time I would consider quitting all these things. So if you like hearing my voice, or if you like reading what I write, or if you like both and you like my novels, please consider heading over to Substack, my website, www.mikeyOPP.com. That's mikeyop.com. And please consider a premium subscription. It's $5 a month or like $50 a year. You just help make this all happen. There are a lot of fees and other things like that. And I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can. So once again, my name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, episode number 200. And we will see you soon. And I'll let the whole song play.
Walking along when I hear this song, and I'm walking alone. Walking alone when I walk into you, and I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel that you're near me, and I sing you on the moon, and then I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel that you're near me, and I sing you on my moon. Walking along when I hear this song, and I walk into you, and you see that I do, and I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel that you're near me, and I sing you while the moon, and then I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel that you're near me, and I sing you on my moon. You are the moon.